Hello, I'm Mitra Sorrells, and I am delighted to welcome Brett Elzinga. He is Senior Vice President of Global Client Management at Onyx CenterSource. Welcome, Brett.
Hi, Mitra. Thanks for having me.
So, I know you are interacting with hospitality partners around the world. So, I really want to start by getting your perspective on something that we certainly see in the updates that we receive at Phocuswright. And that is, we regularly get news from hospitality companies about the innovations in their guest-facing tools, but we hear very little about innovation in their back office systems, such as payments. Why have those seemed to have been left behind?
Yeah, I actually think it's quite understandable. If I'm a hotelier, right, their guest experience is priority number one. It's their core business. It's what drives revenue. So focusing, if you have to look at priorities, focusing on what drives revenue and taking care of that guest in the hotel, it's understandable. So I'm not surprised by that, and I wouldn't second guess a hotel for thinking about that. I think what's equally as important, however, is to think about, especially with the transparency of data and information, that they look at what's booking those guests. How do we get those guests to be repeat customers?
Yeah.
And the agents and agencies that are actually responsible for bringing that business, what's important to them? What's driving that repeat business? And that would be modernizing those payment platforms and making sure there's consistency there. So I think there's a balance.
Okay. So let's talk a bit more about that then. What would you say is really the risk, or maybe there's more than one risk here for hotels that have outdated payment systems, and how is it impacting their operations and growth potential?
Yeah, so outside of reputation, which is a risk in anybody's business, right? There is a risk of reputational harm or impact with delays. I would say, but even beyond that, the access to information, the transparency of information, and the ability to bias or preference hotels in booking systems and tools and even supplier negotiations is what is probably the bigger risk. So those delays in funding or those inconsistencies in payments could actually lead to a loss of revenue at a much bigger level down the road. So I think that's probably the bigger risk.
Okay. And, of course, we know that hotels are really central to the travel experience for most consumers for most of their trips. What steps would you suggest for those hotels that really do want to prioritize modernization in their payment systems?
Yeah, it actually, from our perspective, and even when we talk to our hotel partners today, it's about the partners they use. So specifically, the PMS or property management system providers that hotels use. It's partnering with them to begin delivering that data in a more, I'll say, more modern way, right? So historically, the hotel infrastructure, and it's not uncommon, has delivered data to partners like Onyx and others through FTP sites and files and Excel systems like that. Moving to a more modern interface like an API is, I would argue, the first step to modernizing that solution. So we know that the payment process to an agency partner starts with the data from the hotel partner or the PMS partner. Modernizing that through an API allows for a more systemic flow of data. It eliminates manual intervention. When you eliminate manual intervention, of course, you're mitigating to the extent you can manual or human errors. And so automating that, moving to a modern interface like an API is, I would say, step number one.
Okay. So let's talk. You just mentioned some benefits there. Let's talk a bit more about benefits of doing this. And maybe you can share some examples of how this can really strengthen partnerships or improve efficiency.
Sure. So if we build off that data transmission process, the fact that data and the accuracy, the completeness, and I would say, the speed of that data coming through from the hotel partner is the start of the matching, the reconciliation, and ultimately the payment process to the agencies.
Okay.
If we flip this and we look at it through the lens of an agency partner who is booking those hotels, if we look at it through what KPIs they're measuring to determine which suppliers they continue to book, they are looking at KPIs like days to pay, so speed of payment, the accuracy, the completeness, of course, things like yield, other KPIs that are important to an agency business. So the margin that they're getting actually on those hotel bookings. And so if you flip it and look through the lens of an agency, that's what's important to them. And tools like, as an example, Onyx Insights gives a broader view of those KPIs, the yield, the data, the performance measures that actually allow agencies, and then conversely, hotel partners from what they're supplying, a lens into how they're performing relative to a peer set. And of course, how agencies can use that information to drive a different and perhaps smarter negotiation with their suppliers.
Okay. So I know, and you've really touched on some of the learnings there. I know that Onyx really does sit right there at the center of that hotel and agency dynamic. So given your role at Onyx and engaging with both sides every day, I assume, what do you think would be, let's say, the top three messages or requests that agencies have for hotel partners when it comes to payment transformation?
Sure. So again, it builds off a little bit of those KPIs that I was talking about earlier. And if we think of what are those top three KPIs from what we hear from agency partners, and that doesn't it's not discriminated by size or demographic, right? Agencies around the world. And when I refer to agencies, it's not just agencies, it's agents as well. So independent advisors, they look at supplier revenue as one of their core revenue streams. It is not, it's widely known in the industry that supplier revenues roughly count for, let's say 50%, give or take a little bit, of an agency or an agent's income and revenue stream. And so making sure that the consistency is there, that the data and the transmission of that data is accurate and complete, and that there is a regular flow of that data that allows for those payments to be made efficiently. Those are the drivers actually that an agency is looking at that, and we hear that all the time. They want quicker, faster payments, and more transparency of that data, and those are the drivers that they're looking for.
Okay. Well, very, very interesting and useful information there, I think, for hoteliers to understand some of these dynamics. So, Brett Elzinga from Onyx CenterSource, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Mitra. Pleasure.